Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner is spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Force and joins me now. Good afternoon, Lieutenant Colonel, and thank you for making time this afternoon. As I understand it, there was an incursion by the IDF along the Gaza-Israel border last night. What was the purpose, and are you any closer to retrieving the kidnapped Israelis taken by Hamas during last weekend's atrocities?
Hi, Sangita. Thank you. Indeed, we had, I would say, localized raids along the border and along the frontier between the southern communities of Israel and the Gaza Strip. The purpose was to locate and find people, victims of the massacre, victims or people that had been abducted, and identify perhaps more intelligence assets from terrorists that were killed in the exchange with the IDF forces on the ground. I can say that we have picked up several bodies of Israelis, but there are still many bodies, and there's still lots of people that are unaccounted for. So that's why the number of fatalities keeps increasing. We're over 1,300. And yes, indeed, our operation is ongoing in order to bring back the people as well as we can, and identify the tedious task of identifying those, some of them mutilated, burnt, very, very dire situation.
How many hostages do you believe Hamas still have?
We've announced that the 120 have been identified with Hamas.
And that is including the number of bodies you received, you were able to bring back last night.
That's not including the bodies.
Okay, understood. We're on air now at 2 p.m, according to our calculation, 2 p.m. UK time. The order handed by Israel to civilians living in northern Gaza will expire. And that deadline is for 1.1 million people to leave northern Gaza and go south. What is the military objective there?
We are encouraging people to go south in order to open up our opportunities, in order to strike Hamas, their infrastructure, their terrorist infrastructure, their leadership, their hideouts, their staging grounds, their command and control capabilities, and we want to do it with a minimal civilian casualties. So we need the people to evacuate themselves and in order to try and keep them out of harm's way. This is a situation. Hamas have turned Gaza, the Gaza Strip, into a fortified fortress of terrorism at the expense of the people of Gaza, and we're trying to fight them and not the people of Gaza, because the people of Gaza, they aren't our enemies. Hamas is our enemy.
But is it not true that if you're ordering 1.1 million people to leave northern Gaza and move south, that will inevitably include terrorists? So why are you ordering a million people to leave their homes when even the IDF has agreed that it is an unrealistic expectation for that many people to leave in the time frame given?
The Hamas terrorist organization has held Gaza hostage, the people of Gaza hostage, and as we saw on last Saturday, utilized its territory to do the most atrocious crime against our people.
That is not disputed. That is not disputed. For one moment, Lieutenant Colonel, no one is disputing what Hamas did is essentially tantamount to a war crime. The question I'm asking you is Israel running the same risk by asking 1.1 million people to leave their homes in an entirely unrealistic deadline? A calculation that I've heard from a humanitarian agency is that in order for all of those people to have cleared that area in the time frame you have given them, 30,000 people an hour would have to leave. That is entirely unrealistic, given there are no humanitarian aid agencies working in that region now.
Sangita, that was what I was trying to say as I was talking. Maybe I'm a bit tired, so I'm trying to fill up that position. What I wanted to say is the people need to move. we are conducting our strikes. We are embarking on a most significant strike against a terrorist organization. We've instructed the people to go, and I'm happy to say from all of the reports that people are listening to us. Hamas, on the other hand, told the people, no, don't go, stay and sacrifice yourself, because that's what they do best. Indeed, of course, it is a huge endeavor for people to get up and go. It's a huge endeavor for a hospital to be evacuated. Of course, that's a huge endeavor. And when we announced this, not this morning, but yesterday, that people need to evacuate themselves, our announcement to the media, to the press, to the public, was not bound by an ironclad deadline, because we're watching and we're making sure, and we're trying to encourage more and more people to take the road south. Today we announced 2 roads that would be safe for them to travel on. We have to realize that even as we're speaking today, there are more rockets coming out of Gaza, and the operation is ongoing. And yes, it is a very, very challenging situation to operate in an area where there is so many civilians, and we are trying to minimize that by instructing people to evacuate.
Your description of safe routes for civilians to leave has been challenged by a number of agencies. I will read you comments from just one. This is an unequivocal statement from Martin Griffiths, who is the UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Relief. He says, the order to evacuate 1.1 million people, Palestinians, from northern Gaza defies the rules of war and basic humanity. Gaza is under intense bombardment. Roads and homes have been reduced to rubble. There is nowhere safe to go. Forcing scared and traumatized civilians, including women and children, to move from one densely populated area to another without even a pause in the fighting and without humanitarian support is dangerous and outrageous. Without safe passage and access to basic services, such displacement of civilians will have catastrophic humanitarian consequences and long-term implications. Have you, in fact, ceased bombing Gaza whilst you asked those 1.1 million people to leave?
So listening to the entire message, I was appalled that he never mentioned Hamas's responsibility to the people of Gaza. I'm also quite concerned that I would love to hear his prescription for how we should fight terrorism. And on the other hand, it also looks like...
That, of course, is not his job. He is in charge of... Hang on a minute. He is not in charge of military strategy, Lieutenant Colonel. He is in charge of trying to deliver humanitarian aid. So, with that in mind, I've read you the entire statement. I think the key bit, I think, here is that you are saying there are safe routes for those 1.1 million Palestinians. The United Nations and other aid agencies we've spoken to this morning contest that. So let's break this down. Is there essentially a unilateral ceasefire by Israel, and that's in terms of missiles and bombardments, in order to allow those 1.1 million Palestinians to leave?
What I wanted to say, Sangita, is it sounds like the UN is saying to Israel, you can't fight terrorism, that they expect us to not to protect our people because Hamas is hiding behind theirs. There is a very serious responsibility on Hamas for the situation, and instead of they're hiding, because where is Hamas in these days? They're undercover, they're underground, they don't care about the people. And we need to demand from Hamas to take care of the people of Gaza.
Would you agree that safe passage of civilians is also not just dependent on Hamas, who we can all agree are war criminals, but would you also agree that in part, aside from Hamas, the duty of a belligerent under international law is to ensure that civilians are not disproportionately affected? So I will ask you just once more before moving on. I'll ask you once more before moving on. Are you genuinely providing safe routes for civilians to leave? And that means ensuring that they are routes that are manageable, navigable, and not under fire. Can you give us that guarantee on air now?
We've announced 2 routes that people can travel safely from north to south. And I would say that our mission is to defeat and destroy Hamas's capability so they can never use the Gaza Strip as a staging ground to attack our towns. So while the people of Gaza are suffering and have been failed miserably by the leadership of the Gaza Strip, it is our responsibility to ensure that the security of the people of Israel is restored and that Hamas can never, ever again get up to what they did just 1 week ago. That can never be allowed. And so there needs to be on last Saturday, they chose to break the rules of the game. And what we're saying now is we're changing the game. This will no longer be the reality between the relationship between Israel and Gaza. And as our Prime Minister and the Defense Minister and our Chief of Staff General, Lieutenant General Halevi said, it'll be a long and extensive period. It's not time bound. And our goal is to change the situation. The paradigm needs to change.
Understood. Lieutenant Colonel, you've just said that Israel is changing the rules of the game. If that is the case, are you suggesting that the rules of the game, in other words, international laws of war no longer apply and international humanitarian laws no longer apply? And the reason I ask you is because for 6 days now, Gazan civilians have been under total siege. That means there has been a cessation of water, fuel and food entering Gaza. We have heard shocking reports from humanitarian agencies, civilians on the ground, and also, as you say, medical facilities, in which they say that medication is running out. It is expected that thousands of women will give birth in Gaza. Civilian women will give birth in Gaza. We have been told that, again by verified sources, that because the energy is running out, there will be incubators for babies that are switched off. We have been hearing from, again, verified sources, surgeons and medics on the ground saying that they no longer have basics like surgical spirit to clean out wounds of civilians who have suffered terrible injuries and death as a result of bombing. Tell me, do you not agree that there are laws of war that and humanitarian laws that govern this situation, and Israel is breaking them?
I do not agree at all. When I said changing the rules of the game or changing the game, I was implying that the mastermind of the massacre of last week, Yahya Sinwar, can no longer live under a sense of protection. I'm exemplifying that in the fact that every leader of Hamas, from Yahya Sinwar, this mastermind of the massacre, all the way down to the person that breached the fence on Saturday Ali Kadi, that we killed in a strike over the last 24 hours, and anybody in between, they are all going to pay for this action. That is the change of the game. If they lived before last Saturday in a sense of self-confidence, that they can run around the Gaza Strip and manage the things, so that changing the game is they are no longer in charge. They are being pursued. That is our role. And so I don't agree with at all with the long list that you said. The IDF operates in accordance to the laws of armed conflict. That is the framework of all of our military operations as a professional military, and that is how we conduct ourselves. The whole evacuation process is part of that. Would you expect us to say, no, just stay at home and hopefully you won't get caught up in the conflict? No, we're telling you, Hamas hid behind you. Hamas, we destroyed, 2 days ago, we destroyed drones laden with explosives that Hamas, guess where they put them? They put them on the rooftops of houses. They don't care who lives in those houses. They don't care who's on the second or third floor of that building. So we took out, we announced, and we took out the drones so that they cannot cause any more damage, as they did last Saturday when they used drones to strike positions and communities and people partying in the desert. So this is what we're up against. This is the enemy that has embedded himself so deeply entrenched within the civilian arena that we have no choice. And so when we're trying to minimize, and since the dawn of war, civilians have always been caught up in armed conflict, and it is a tragedy for the people of Gaza and tragedy for the people of Israel who went through this massacre.
Of course, it is a tragedy, undoubtedly, for the people of Israel.
It is our job to destroy Hamas and their capabilities and their ability to govern the Gaza Strip as a staging ground from the Gaza Strip into Israel and utilize their power and their cynicism.
I can see that is your military objective. I can see
that is how we're going to do it.
I can see that the military objective is to exercise Hamas totally and forever from the Gaza Strip. That is clear. But as you have just said, that civilians always get caught up in war. That also is true. However, you, more than I, will be aware that the Geneva Conventions and modern laws of war were born after the Second World War as a result of seeing huge civilian loss of life. That has codified two ideas. One of them is proportionality. The other one is very clearly set out in Article 33 of the Geneva Convention, which is that civilian populations will not be punished for the actions of combatants. I will ask you for a final time, the total siege of Gaza, which prohibits water, food and electricity, which civilian lives depend on, puts Israel in a position where it has either already broken international law or is about to break international law.
So I'll comment on those 2 points. I'd say First of all, any decent person would understand that somebody that comes in and chops your head off in the middle of the night does not deserve to be fed by you. That's the fundamental reasoning behind it. Without going beyond that. So, and again, it weighs back to the responsibility of Hamas and everything they've done in the last 20 years, rather than building a flourishing society in the Gaza Strip. They have created a hateful, genocidal organization that has no regard for human life, and they will abuse all of the situation. Our whole conversation in this interview is because of how they have abused for so many years the civilian arena to fortify their position. And I would like to comment on the question of proportionality. Proportionality weighs on the necessity of a military action against the suffering that the action might cause to civilians in the vicinity. During on-conflict death of civilians, no matter how grave and regrettable they are, does not necessarily constitute a crime, even when it's known that some civilian deaths may occur or injuries may occur. So there is a framework. We are operating in order to minimize that. We send leaflets, we send text messages, we make announcements, we make phone calls, we make public announcements telling people this is an area you need to evacuate, because yes, we are coming to take down Hamas.
But that's our responsibility. It's a
moral responsibility to the people of Israel that these terrorist organizations cannot regroup and conduct more attacks against us, cannot kill more Israelis, cannot launch more rockets at us, and not hold the people of Gaza hostage because of this conversation that we're having. So yes, the people of Gaza are paying dearly because of their poor leadership, but the people of Israel refuse to be held hostage by Hamas anymore because of this situation.
My time is running out. I have just one more question. You have said that you do not believe that Israel is responsible for feeding, watering or sending fuel to Gaza. If that is the case, why will Israel not open up humanitarian lines through which supplies can be sent to aid organizations working on the ground?
I am aware that there are discussions being taken place at this time on this issue. I expect that there will be some sort of hiatus. I don't know to commit when. Of course, we are mostly concerned of how, if that would happen, Hamas would regroup and conduct more attacks against us. So there is a dire situation on the ground. People are paying with their lives. It is the responsibility of Hamas that launched this war, this brutal war on Israel, and we are not willing for that to continue.
Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you very much indeed for your time. I know you are very tired. You have been doing endless media rounds. I've seen them, and we do appreciate your time. Spokesperson for the IDF.